Good afternoon, students. I hope your day is going well. Well, as we begin our wonderful English language arts learning lesson for today, I wanted to ask each of you a question. Have you ever read a book or watched your favorite movie and wondered, was there a secret that needed to be discovered on how the book or your favorite movie was set up behind the scenes? If so, I have a wonderful surprise for you, and I need you to put on your detective hats. Even as older kids, it's always good to put on the detective hats because we're getting ready to solve a mystery here today and take a deep dive. You're going to learn how to identify and describe the five stages of a story plot. I'll say that again. You're going to learn how to identify and describe the five stages of a story plot. All I want you to do right now is listen to this lesson. Then, after I introduce the lesson and then make sure that you understand what you learn, then I will show you how I need you to write it, create it, and illustrate it in your own personal reading interactive notebook. So, right now, I just want you to listen. The first stage in the story's plot is what we call the introduction or the exposition. During the first stage, you will learn who the characters are, where the story takes place, which is formally called the setting. You will also learn how to look for what we call the five W's: the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. They all come from the character's perspective. It's almost like he's going on an adventure and he has that detective hat on and he's trying to find out the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why from all the characters' point of view. So listen closely. The second stage in the story's plot is what we call the rising action. The rising action. Things start to rise up in the story. During the second stage of the story's plot, the rising action, here starts where we call the plot or the conflict. There's a big problem that takes place, and the character has to face a problem either within themselves or in the world. If it's something that happened in themselves, they have to be able to confront it. Or if it's something in the world, they have to be able to face it. But either way, it's something that has to be solved. And that's what we call the second stage, the rising action. Now we come to what we call the climax. The climax is what we call the third stage in the story's plot. With the climax, it's when the big problem actually is now being faced. There's a big turning point. And it's almost if you can see like the top of a mountain where you have the climax taking place at the top of this mountain. And when they come together at the top of the mountain, there's a lot of intensity. There's some suspicion that takes place. There's some suspense. There's some drama that keeps you on the edge of your seat, like reading a book. You can't stop turning the pages. You want to find out what happens next, what happens next, what happens next. Or when you're watching a movie, your eyes may get a little bigger and you start to eat your popcorn just a little bit slower because you're like, oh my goodness, the movie won't let me go. So there's something that's taking place in the climax in which there's a big problem that has to be faced. Then we go to what we call the fourth stage in the story's plot. This is what we call the falling action, the falling action, the fourth stage in the story's plot. During the fourth stage in the story's plot, the falling action, the worst is over between the main character and the conflict that's taking place. Things start to slow down. It's not as fast. It's not as suspenseful. You begin to see exactly what's happening, what's taking place. And again, the problem just starts to be solved. And the characters, you kind of see who's who, who's what. And then you can also answer the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why from the character's point of view. You begin to see all of this. It starts to take place. It starts to click. And so you can answer, who was for the character, who was against the character, and the what. Well, why did this happen? And then when did it happen? Oh yeah, this probably happened at the beginning or towards the middle. Okay, I can identify that. And then you can say, oh, I know why that happened. I know why that happened. All right. The next part, the fifth part, the fifth stage of the story's plot is what we call the resolution. With the resolution, that means the story has come to an end, that it's over either one or two ways. It can be over by the story ending, or it can what we call be at a rest. and the author might decide to write what we call a sequel or another part of the story. Those are my best kind because I always want to know, well, what happens next? What happens next? Don't leave me hanging here. So, again, the 5 stages of a story plot. The first one is called the introduction or the exposition. The second stage of the story's plot, that is what we call the rising action. The third stage of the story plot, that's what we call the climax. The fourth stage in the story's plot is what we call the falling action. And the fifth stage of the story's plot is what we call the resolution. Now, what I'm going to do is just to make sure that you learned what I taught, because I always want to make sure learning is taking place. You have a index card that was passed out to you before class started. And you have the index card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick video of the 3 little pigs. Oh, yeah, I know the 3 little pigs. You learned that or saw the story or heard the story way back some years ago when you were earlier in elementary school. But now you're older. I want you to be able to hear the story. But when you hear the story, I want you to be able to apply the 5 parts of the story elements, the 5 stages of the story that you just learned, and to be able to tell me which each one of those parts are. Any questions? Okay, students, you can go ahead and get started. All right, good job.